Capitalism versus Socialism. Psh, battle of the century. President overthrown through propaganda and fake news. Are you talking about Donald Trump, man? Like, nah. I do feel like we should be more advanced if it weren't for... You're joking. You would not be more advanced. This is stupid alone, right? Even if we accept capitalism, right? This here is just dumb. I feel like we should be more advanced if it weren't for the communist revolution. Unless you are like Russian, but even then, like no. Like no. Like take for example, right, the space race that was engaged with because of the communist revolution, you know, the fact that the USSR opposed the United States led to the space race. Well, the Apollo space program, which was resultant from the space race, generated $14 for every $1 that was put into it. So the amount of money that was actually generated, even just from that competitive environment, from like competing with the USSR, the innovations that were produced, which led to a massive economic boom, that was the result of the communist revolution. We should be having cover calls at this point. President overthrown through propaganda and fake news. Are you talking about Donald Trump, man? Like, nah. Like, let's be honest, right? Like, don't get me wrong. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, they're both terrible. I'm very glad I don't live in the United States. I mean, not that I really like the Tories, but, you know, they're not good candidates. But, like, it wasn't overthrown through propaganda and fake news, man. Like, that is actually his propaganda. Like, the whole fake news thing perpetuated by Donald Trump is itself, like, a form of propaganda. Martyring himself, I'm at war, deliberately carving the country in two between certain factions in order to support himself and maintain his own interests, whilst, you know, undermining the quote-unquote democracy of the state. What propaganda and fake news led to Donald Trump being removed, really? Like, most of the things that were, like, propagated for Donald, like, about Donald Trump were just, like, the stupidity that he actually, like, committed. And it's the same with, like, Joe Biden. Things that were, like, perpetuated about Joe Biden, there was a lot of propaganda on that side as well. So, like, don't get me wrong, I do agree that there will have been propaganda against Donald Trump, and I do agree that there would have been propaganda against Joe Biden, but that's just the political system. Basically, corporations hedge their bets, pay both parties so that either way, the regulations reflect the kind of regulations that they want for their sector, and then that's just what regulatory capture is, and it's how the political system works. Either way, the American people have lost. The president, like, regardless of whether it was Joe Biden or Donald Trump, is shit. And I'm just going to say that he wasn't overthrown anyway. The people in control weren't the president, weren't the party in the first place. They were the economic interests which were supplying the party funding, which ultimately lets people have an election campaign and win the election in the first place. So, what a load of nonsense. Yeah, let's switch over to capitalism versus socialism now, yeah? As well, this way you think of this format. I've not really done this before. I don't know if I'm talking too fast. I actually just had like 2 coffees before I came on here. It might just be that I'm over caffeinated. In regards to free will, are you a compatibilist? Like, I approach free will, I think, from a varying perspective. I wouldn't talk about like prior causation in relation to the individual. I take more of an existentialist approach, and causation to be essentially self-imposed. Yeah, and you can have like self-imposed causal or like post hoc imposed causal relations between individuals, and in that way I guess it's somewhat compatibilist. But it's if you want to understand me, like, kind of position on free will, it should be outlined mostly in the Determinism Debunked video if you haven't seen it. But yeah, thank you for your question. Have I considered streaming on Twitch as well as YouTube? Absolutely. I just need to get enough money so that, like, I can afford I'm going to basically invest in Twitch, Streamlabs Prime, so I can stream on both platforms. But right now I'm just basically trying to make this at least somewhat a profitable adventure, like the filthy capitalist I am. I think the funny thing is that capitalists love to, like, kind of point out, you know, like, are you trying to make money? If you're trying to make money, then you are not a socialist. You are betraying your ideals. You are evil. Why don't you work for free? If you worked for free, you'd be a real socialist. Real socialists starve to death. And it's like, right, well, I do live in the capitalist state. Like, I do believe in, like, the fair treatment of individuals within this system, and I think we should perpetuate that fair treatment onwards. But, like, living in the system that I am living in, I am going to be required to make certain, like, economic gains in order to sustain myself and, like, my loved ones. So it's not really a critique of me. It's like a critique of the system. It doesn't allow me to have, like, any form of autonomy really and decide what I'm going to do so much. And never mind that, like, even within this sort of system, everything I'm doing, like, isn't exploitative. I don't want to be an employer. I don't want to be someone who employs individuals and takes advantage of them. Like, one of the things I'm doing at the minute is actually I'm hoping to hire an editor. By hire, I mean basically partnership with an editor. So one of the things I'm doing is, like, even from the upcoming course, like an introduction to Western philosophy, which you can get now for 33% off. The link is in the description. It's going to be a great course. I'm going to give people an introduction to every single major field in philosophy throughout time, basically engaging with many of the thinkers I engage with on my degree, which I had to pay considerably for, and basically make this knowledge a lot more accessible to the general population whilst profiting, because I have to sustain myself under capitalism. But to do that, I think I'm going to need an editor, just because it's a monumental task. There's a lot that needs done. I'm going to need some help, like, editing all the footage, right? So I'm now engaged with an editor and offering commission to the editor, but I'm not just basically paying them a one-off fee where they get a certain amount of money for the amount of labor that or the amount of, like, work that they've done, and then I basically tell them to go away and never see them again. I don't think that's fair. I think that if this individual works on the piece, then they should own part of that piece. And I mean, get paid as a lifetime commission no matter how much money I make. So if, like, let's say I was to make a considerable amount of money, I don't see myself making like absolute bank necessarily, but let's say I was making, like, let's say I made like 100,000 on it, right? That editor, like, even like some of the higher paid editors, I might have paid, like, let's say max like $5,000, right? Like for like the video production, right? Maybe that's a bit low for like some of the really high-end editors, but let's say I would have paid about $5,000. Well, the person with lifelong commission, like, would get more like $10,000, because they were getting, like, commission lifelong, and then they have that to always fall back on. They would have that safety net of knowing that they've done the work for that product, and every time that product sells, they are going to get paid for the amount of value that they've produced. And I think that is a primary difference between how socialists should behave within capitalism. And I was going to do a video of, like, how socialists should behave in capitalism. So if you're interested in that, I'll do a whole video of how I think that we should behave as socialists within this economic mildew. But there is a real big problem with how people just think that, like, oh, you're a socialist and you're not willing to just work for free? Well, then you should just, like, admit that you're you're a hypocrite and you're a fake socialist and stuff. And it's like, oh my god, it's just terrible. It really is terrible. Capitalism versus socialism. Psh, battle of the century. Capitalism versus socialism. Why are Americans apparently incapable of understanding what the term socialist means? YouGov also polled Americans about countries they consider the most socialist. Among the Republic, Venezuela, China, Russia. China, I'm just going to say this right now, right? China's not even communist, right? Like, China, I said this in the last stream I did. That is not communist, right? China is fascist. It is a totalitarian government which partly controls it massively controls its economy for the select interests of the few, but ultimately works on a capitalist system which deliberately exploits its labor force, actually to the point in which it ultimately undermines its labor force to a greater degree than the rest of the essentially developed world, in order to economically outcompete other capitalist nations. And that's one of the reasons why it keeps its currency so low, so that it can exploit its labor force massively. Like, a corporation goes over there, gets something produced in China, and then that gets exported out of China at a much lower rate because of the deliberately shitty currency, the deliberately, like, cheap currency. And so it's all like a game. In America, even, like, basically arguing with China, basically telling them to inflate that currency, like, basically put that currency up because it was being deliberately lowered by the government. And to maintain, like, high exports. And so, yeah, like, someone in the chat said state capitalist. Like, absolutely, yeah, like China's state capitalist. The USSR arguably state capitalist as well. But, like, China is definitely state capitalist. And I don't think I'm a champagne socialist either. I can't even afford Bucks Fizz, man. I couldn't even afford goddamn Prosecco. Like, why do you look at someone as taking advantage of employees? Are they not engaging in trade? No, they're not engaging in trade. When a salary is negotiated, where is the salary negotiated? Like, where is the negotiating table where I can go to my employer, like, look, you are not paying me enough, I will leave. Okay, leave. I will replace you with the millions of unemployed individuals who are just as qualified as you, who are deliberately kept unemployed by the mechanism of capitalism. And if you don't think they're deliberately kept unemployed, then you haven't read someone like Milton Friedman, for example, who was the economic advisor to the Reagan and Thatcher governments, which is basically the economic doctrine of today. Essentially, like, there's no negotiation. There is economic coercion into jobs from which alienate ourselves from, like, the means of production, autonomy, self-determination, and ultimately a fair trade. there is no negotiating table in which the individual can turn up as a member of like the labor force and go, look, like, this is not okay. Which is why we have trade union movements ultimately trying to negotiate for the working class in order to provide, you know, a better standard of working conditions for the working class. The issue is that even you get the government who ultimately undermine the power of the labor unionist movements, like for example the Thatcher government, in order to make things like sympathy striking illegal. So like we can't even stand together as a unified whole in order to challenge, like, you know, the corporate dogmatism. And so where's the negotiating table? Like, where's the fairness? Where can I negotiate with my employer? Do you have the ability to learn new skills? Yeah, you have the ability to learn new skills, Olaf, but who's going to employ you with those new skills? And then if you get new skills, like, how is that necessarily going to generate you income? Even if you manage to like free yourself from the, you know, the employee-employer relationship, what happens then? You try to make a small business and then you're out, you know, even like the statistics on r/capitalism, most small businesses don't earn for like the first few years. Many small business owners struggle to support themselves. Many like 70% I think of British businesses fail in the first 3 years. Like the competitiveness of capitalism is bad enough when we don't even consider the fact that there are deliberate market blocks and the differences of how small businesses approach things like taxation versus big businesses which don't approach taxation. If you're something like Amazon or Google, you're probably not even going to pay tax. Well, if you're like a small business paying like 19% corporation tax in the first year of any profits you make, and then, you know, you're barely pulling anything enough to even support yourself. Well, you're pulling just enough to support yourself and then pay your workforce. Well, you're not seeing like greater economic gains enough to invest in your business, which ultimately allows you to like further yourself in the market. There are like economic issues, even in relation to like, okay, you get more skills, you become you know, a better, more capable individual. Well, unless you have a qualification or some sort of experience or something like that which allows you to better yourself in terms of against, you know, the rest of the workforce, then fair enough, then you manage to outcompete somebody else, but somebody else is getting put on the back burner whilst you succeed. And if you manage to escape this employee, you know, like coercive force within the labor market, well, then you're facing like unbelievable amounts of competition, which is deliberately rigged in the side of big businesses. There is also the problem of being overqualified. Yeah, overqualified. What the fuck does that even mean, man? Like, how can you be overqualified? That doesn't even make sense. That doesn't make sense, man. Like, I knew someone that got like rejected from like ASDA because they had like I think they had a BA in psychology, right? But they're just trying to sustain themselves while they go on to do their master's degree. And this was many years ago, and ASDA wouldn't hire them just because they had a BA in psychology. And it's like, right, well, I'm sorry, but like the reality of the situation is that what they are expected to do is just survive on nothing, or like find a job that says they're not overqualified. Well, then you're going to be competing with the people with the same qualifications. And let's say you're the one that loses out. I mean, there's only so many jobs. Let's say you lose out on that position. How are you going to sustain yourself? It's going to have to be social welfare. Anyway, let's get back to this. YouGov polled Americans about countries they consider the most socialist. Among Republicans, Venezuela, 60%, China, 57%. China's not socialist. Russia, 57%. How is Russia socialist now? Russia is like so fucking capitalist, man. Like Russia is so fucking capitalist. We're identified as the world's most socialist countries compared to Sweden. Well, Sweden's not socialist either. Denmark is not socialist, and Norway is not socialist. Taking party allegiances out of the question, the top three most socialist countries, according to the US, are China with 46%, Venezuela with 44%, and Russia with 41%. Some of the capitalist countries admired by the squad are also high rankings, such as Sweden and Denmark, respectively. Yeah, I don't know why. That is strange. I do think that like the Americans, like not just the Americans, but the general population have misconceptions about socialism, right? Like how many people just think that like socialism means getting paid equally? Like, and this isn't like a thing that I've heard like once or twice. This is a thing that I've heard like loads, where they think that everyone's going to get paid the same. And it's like, well, no, man, nobody wants that. Like, nobody wants that. Like, no, like, even if, like, just imagine, like, we're all agreed on, like, certain socialist values. And let's say that was one. That's nonsense. We're not going to do that. The whole point of socialism really is to imply a more meritocratic environment, not a deliberately unfair environment, which is why, like, you know, Karl Marx saw that as, like, you know, a bourgeois notion of equality.